I'll do a little bit of introductions here. I'm Jean Waters with the Nebraska Business Development Center Pollution Prevention Regional Information Center. And we're glad to have you all join us today for this webinar and training from Alicia Culver of the Responsible Purchasing Network. So it's a go-to meeting, which means that nobody is muted. So if you want, and that's fine as long as we don't have background noise. But you can mute yourself if you want to. Looks like Marty, you're muted. Scott, you're not, and I don't hear anything from your location, so that's perfect. We're going to go through these slides. Alicia's got presentation, but we want you all to ask questions. We want to be sure that we're covering the information that you need. So please either chat in, or I don't see how you can raise your hand, but you can unmute yourself and I'll notice that, and then we'll interrupt Alicia for a question. So thanks everybody for joining us. Alicia, I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Great. And just for a check, my thing doesn't show that the telephone thing is on, but you can hear it okay, and you think it's going through?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So welcome everyone today. And actually, I think it would be helpful for me just to know who's on the phone first, and then I'm going to walk you through how we created a green office supplies contract for a group of about 10 states that was working together through NASPO, which is the National Association of State Procurement Officials. They run what's called WSCA, the Western States Contracting Alliance, and then they now turned it into the WSCA-NASPO Cooperative, and they since have changed their name again in the last year, called to Value Point. And so, but many of you may know them as WSCA contracts, but they're a national cooperative purchasing organization. But if you could help me just by giving me just your name, your title, and the organization that you're with.
Okay, we'll start here. John, do you want to go first?
I'm John Kins. I'm a professor at Bellevue University, and I teach sustainability management there.
And John's been very involved in this process that we've been doing with environmentally preferable purchasing, and he works closely with the purchasing agents there at Bellevue.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
I'm Marty Sane with Creighton University.
Great. And Marty, are you in the purchasing department?
I am. I'm the IT enterprise resource purchasing agent.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, and you're with Creighton. Okay, good. Next.
It's Ed Dupree.
My name is Scott Benson. I'm with the University of Nebraska-Kearney. I'm in the Business Services Office, purchasing, and my specific responsibilities are mainly in contract management.
Okay, and two people were talking right at the beginning, so who was that speaking?
Scott Benson.
Scott, okay, thanks, Scott. Okay, next.
It's Ed Dupree, and I'm also with Creighton, and I do the office supply contract.
Okay, great. Do we have anyone else on the call who's, do we have anyone else on the call, first of all? And do we have anyone else on the call who's specific? Oh,
we do.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought. Maybe not.
That's all I see.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we have Scott, John, who's with us here, Marty, and Ed.
Okay, great. Okay. And other than Ed, is anyone specifically involved with doing the solicitation and contracting work for their office supplies contract for their facility?
This is Scott. I do not do directly with that, but my office does.
Okay, great. So we'll take this back to them. Okay, great. actually, if we could just go around, I have this question later, but I wanted to just get a sense. If you could let me know who you're purchasing your office supplies with now, and whether you're using a cooperative or going out to bid on your own. I think that would help me to just set the stage, and I should have put those questions earlier. But so maybe starting with John, who's your office supply contract vendors, and do you do that on your own or are you using a cooperative?
It's mainly done on their own, and it's to clarify, it's Tina Payton who does it for us at Bellevue University. So she has a list of suppliers that she works with, but it's really done on their own and make choices on their own.
But they do have a contract, Alicia, with Payless.
Oh, with Payless. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. And Creighton, Marty with Creighton, or Ed?
Well, I do the contract. This is Ed, and it's also through Payless, and it's we do that on our own.
Okay. Okay. And let's see. Anyone else?
This is Scott. We primarily use Office Depot as a university system.
Okay, great. Okay.
Alicia, UNO has had a change in their purchasing guy. Ken retired, so there's somebody filling in, and he couldn't come today. And then UNMC is also cooperating with us in this. And we invited Scott because we're trying to help get some things going in the university system. But we have 4 universities, University of Nebraska campuses, that contract with, they put out for their own bids, and Office Depot is the one that has that right now. Is that accurate, Scott?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so great. Can you go to the next slide? So what we're going to talk about today is the process that we went through to develop what I'm going to call an all-green office supplies contract, where essentially everything has been pre-screened and is set up as a separate contract. And this is very new. It's something that we are still getting all the final paperwork done, but the contracts are up and running, and we've been working very closely with Office Depot and Staples to make sure we know all the green products that they have that are available for this green contract. Let me just mention, first of all, who we are, and second of all, if you have a question, there's probably going to be a little bit of a delay between the slides, so you should feel free at any time to just ask a question. It's a small enough group, and I can't see if people are, raising their hands, so just go ahead and say, I have a question, and then just go ahead and ask it. So I think most of you were on when I was presenting last time just on general green purchasing, but just so you know, we're an international network of purchasing agents and sustainability professionals and NGOs that are working together to try to make green purchasing easier, make it less confusing in the market, and make it more effective in terms of having an impact on human health and the environment. You can just go ahead. And we do some technical support work, and most of our work has been either directly with a state government or local governments. We've tended to work a lot with states, largely because if you can get a state contract in place that is very green, then what happens is universities and local governments and other public entities can all use it. And so we worked last year with the WISCA-NASPO sourcing team that was set up. The state of Oregon was the lead state. There were some other states, California, for example, was involved, but ultimately they ended up deciding to do their own contracts, so they're not listed here. The closest state to you guys would be Missouri. And we worked, they set up their sourcing team and decided on how they wanted to develop this contract. And originally we had talked about just greening up the entire contract. There were some states that wanted to have just a regular conventional office supplies contract. And then there were some states that felt strongly that they wanted to have a separate all green contract, so that if an entity decides that they just want to buy green office supplies, then they can do that. And what we basically have found in the past is that a lot of the green products end up getting handicapped in the procurement process, especially on some of these large office supplies contracts. And my experience is that what happens is a conventional contract is set up, and there may be some language about, you know, identifying the green products and doing green spend report, but the pricing is largely based on a market basket, or some people call it a core list or a more narrow bid list. And often those products are conventional products, and so those are getting very deep discounts, whereas the other products, the green products, sometimes a few are on the bid list, but they will often get a lower discount. And so you start with products where the pricing where it's already maybe a little bit more expensive for a green product, and then because the conventional products are getting deeper discounts, that differential is even greater. And so what ultimately happens is that it's very hard to get people to switch to the green products because they haven't been as deeply discounted. And what we have been finding, which is really interesting, I've been spending the last couple months since this contract went in place, is comparing the pricing of the green products on this contract with other people who have negotiated contracts with the same vendors, Office Depot and Staples, and we could do it even with others. We literally are taking the products and seeing, oh, what price did they get on their 8.5 by 11 copy paper, and finding that this process is yielding better pricing on green products. So what happened first was the sourcing team was set up, and they discussed the strategy for the contract, and they have very specific contracting protocols that they use to make sure that it can qualify as a cooperative that other states can use. Next slide. So WSCA NASPO has a list of, they collected the data from all these different states that were participating, and they categorized it into different categories. So you can see some of the different categories. There are 49 categories, adhesives and dictionaries and storage boxes, et cetera, and everything went in. And then if they couldn't figure out what it was, there's a small category of uncategorized spend, and that helped them to figure out waiting for the price evaluation part. And it also helped us to see what was on there. There were certain things that were not on there. They didn't have electronics on there because WSCA already has a contract for electronics like computers and copiers and things. And then they also didn't have furniture on there, again, because WSCA NASPO already has a furniture contract, so they didn't want that to compete. And so that was sort of the limitation. But one of the interesting things is that they pulled out certain types of paper that were very high spend, like 8.5 by 11 copy paper, and really said, okay, give us your absolute rock bottom price on these products. So there actually were, in a sense, just so you understand, there were two sort of solicitations. There was one RFP, but the vendors could bid either on conventional office supplies, which has green products in it, or they could bid and or they could bid on this track 2. So it was a track 1 and a track 2. Track 1 was conventional. Track 2 was green. And understanding that the track 1 does have a lot of the green products in it, but the track 2, the green products really had to do more to make sure that they really were truly green. So something that had 3% recycled content would not count. So we had very specific criteria. And we started going through this and saying in category 1, the specs would be X, Y, Z, and we found there was a lot of duplication of that, and so we ended up coming up with specs for all the different categories, anything on the contract meeting certain specifications. And why don't you go to the next slide, and I'll show you how that works out. So first of all, does anybody have a question on the contracting process and the sort of scope of this contract? Any questions? Any comments? So what we did is we set up a list of sustainability criteria for the contract. And so we basically said, no matter what category it's in, if it has this third-party certification or recognition, or it meets certain levels of recycled content, or it has other environmental sustainability attributes, then it would pass, and it can be included on this green contract. We also then went into some special specifications for certain categories, so ink and toner cartridges, which I'll tell you about. But also another category was disinfectants. Because we had prohibited ingredients, we said no antimicrobials. But if they wanted to have a break room cleaner that was a disinfectant, we actually also had some specifications for what would be okay, like no bleach, peroxide is okay. And then overall, so the first 4 things are positive things. If it has one of these 4 things, and I'm going to go into detail on what these are, then it would be okay, except if it had a prohibited chemical or material. So for example, we would take a binder that had 100% recycled content would be, yes, it would pass that. But if it was 100% PVC vinyl, which is a human carcinogen, we would say, sorry, we're not allowing any PVC in anything in this contract. So it had to both pass the positive screens, and it couldn't fail the negative screens, and I'm going to go into those as well. Then we, during the bidding process, there needed to be documentation of environmental attributes. So whatever we said, they had to provide it. And some of it was in the bid sheet, and then if further information, if we had a question, we were checking it, we couldn't find verification, they had to provide that at request. And then verification of ongoing compliance, which essentially meant that not only were the products in the market basket needed to be verified, but every single product that they offer ultimately on this contract needs to be verified. So literally each of Office Depot and Staples have gone through and given me thousands of products that they are requesting to be on this contract. And we generally have passed about 3/4 of the products. So we failed about 1/4, and some of them would just be the recycled content is too low. So they might call it in their catalog a recycled content product, but maybe it only had 10% or less recycled, and so we said, sorry, that's not green enough to really be considered. It can still be offered on the conventional product, but not on this green contract. So this is the overview, high-level overview of the criteria. Next slide. If any questions, go ahead and, but I will go into each of these.
Alicia, we were talking about some of, I think you'll probably go into this detail, but the list of prohibited chemicals, and you just said 10% recycled content isn't enough. So are you going to go through that in some of your next slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And my connection lost. Did you advance it?
Yes, we have the third-party certifications recognitions slide up right now.
Okay.
Number 6.
The third-party recognitions, Oregon, which has a very strong green chemistry executive order, really felt strongly, and they, as the lead state, felt like as much as possible they wanted to make sure that all the products had third-party recognitions and certifications. Now we know for recycled content and other things that's not available, but where it was, we referenced it. So in the RFP document itself, which we can provide to you if you're interested, there was a whole certification section and specification section. And so basically, if a product offered by any of the vendors had any of these certifications, cradle to cradle, you may not know what that is, but they look at multi-attribute certifications. EPA's Design for the Environment, which is now called Safer Choice, and you might find those on like a break room cleaner, a hand soap. UL, which recently took over the Eco Logo program, and those could be on, again, janitorial products, toilet paper. Fair trade, there's a number of fair trade certifications that are available, and so we could, if any of those are on there, we listed what they were. Green Seal, again, for hand soaps and toilet paper, at Rainforest Alliance. So these are all multi-attribute. These are all certifications that don't just look at one thing. They look at a product more holistically, and we thought these were the strongest certifications, so we led with those. Recognizing that certain products don't have multi-attribute certifications, but that they have important and credible single attribute certifications, we also listed there. So if a product, now ACMI is the Art and Creative Materials Institute, it is an industry-based certification, but it really is the best thing that we have for things like markers and other types of art supplies and glues that they go through, and they have a list of approved products. And so they had to have the ACMI approved product. You can see that AP label right there. Some you may have seen that before. Food serviceware and compostable bags had to have Biodegradable Products Institute or an equivalent, so they could have the European equivalent, for example. Anything that's Energy Star is okay. So that could be like a light bulb. So they could offer a compact fluorescent. If it didn't have the Energy Star, we said no. It's not recognized to make sure that it has quality and performance issues as well as energy efficiency. Forest Stewardship Council was okay for sustainable forestry, but the industry version of that called SFI was not acceptable. So if a product like a Post-it only had SFI as its certification, it would not pass. But if a product had FSC, it would, and that's because there's been lots of reports showing that the Forest Stewardship Council certification is much stronger. And so, and originally we didn't think that we were just going to allow that for paper products, but there were some states that felt strongly that they wanted that, so we included it. There are several certifications for what's called low emitting, which means it could be shelving unit or bookcase or something like that, that are low emitting, meaning that they don't emit into the indoor environment formaldehyde and other chemicals. And so UL Green Guard is one, SCS Indoor Advantage. So they had to have one of those. If they had one of those, they could be offered on this contract. And then USDA Organic for stuff like coffee, tea. So coffee and tea and sugar could get on for being organic or fair trade. A lot of times they're both. So those are all the third-party certifications. Have any questions about those?
Alicia?
Yes.
Alicia, you don't have EPEAT as one of your multi-attribute certifications. And I know that EPEAT is mostly for computers, but since Marty is on the phone as well, I wondered if you wanted to say anything about EPEAT.
Oh, okay. EP ultimately got accepted. The reason we didn't have it on there is because they didn't have computer equipment listed as an acceptable category because they're separate, like I said at the beginning. They have a separate contract with WSCA for office supply or for computer equipment and for furniture, and so they didn't want, and for copiers and printers and multifunction devices, and so they thought it would be confusing to include it in there since those product categories were not offered on the contract. Now, if somebody accepted it, we would accept EP, because it's a strong multi-attribute, but we just didn't put it on because the products that it covers were not on the contracting list.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Now there's questions about if people are trying to order additional things, and so we're still going back and forth. This is a dynamic contract, so it's possible if, they decide to add computer equipment, then we would there's a provision to allow, other acceptable products as long as they accept the certification. And actually there was one interesting change. Actually, you can go to the next slide. Oh, you're on there. With recycled content, it had to do with cartridges, that there's now some that have high recycled content. Originally we said no, and then they decided to change it. Okay, so for things that have recycled content, they typically are not third-party verified. Now, there are some products that are getting third-party verified for recycled content. You can have a third-party verifier come in and say, yes, I make sure it is. Or the toilet paper, for example, the recycled content is baked in. But because so many recycled content products don't have it, they did not require third-party verification of recycled content. So here's how we fell out on it. If a product was covered under EPA's comprehensive procurement guidelines. So EPA set a standard. Now, granted, those are relatively old, but if they set a standard for recycled content, then the product needed to comply with that. So, for example, if copy paper or Post-it, the EPA CPG, they call it, is 30% post-consumer. If something had 10% post-consumer, we said, sorry. It can go on the conventional contract, but it can't be on here. So that was where the cutoff was. If there's a product category that does not have a CPG categorization and level, so there's just some products for which EPA never set a guideline. So I have some examples here, pens and paper clips. We just said, okay, we're just going to have a categorization that says anything else, if it's minimum 30% post-consumer recycled content or minimum 50% total, so post-consumer is the stuff that gets collected and goes through a recycling program, and total recycled can include is the material that is post-industrial, or if it was like 30% post-consumer plus another 20% post-industrial to get a total of 50 or higher, then all of those would pass. So that was where we set the limit. So next slide. So what we did is we went through the EPA comprehensive procurement guidelines, and we made one document that had everything that would possibly be in this solicitation, just for easy reference, just for us, also for the bidders, and we said here it is. So if it's a binder, it needs to be 25% total recycled or whatever it is. So, and it would have each of the categories in there. Copy paper is 30%, envelopes are 10. So you can see some of them are below our minimum. It's just that that's what EPA had, so we let those go through.
And is this available for anybody, Alicia?
Yeah, I can send you the solicitation. What we had been doing is it's posted on the Oregon website, and actually I have a call later this week to talk with Oregon and WSCA about how we've been sending it out by contacting the person who's in charge of this, and because they originally did not want people just to go to RPN's website because we were going to post it all. They wanted them to go to their website, so we're kind of working it out where it can live. But I've been sending it around like crazy and can send you the whole RFP, which has the attachment D, which is all the specifications.
Thanks.
Okay. So these are the EPA guidelines, and if it doesn't meet those, then if it meets one of those other criteria, 30% minimum, 50% total. So next slide, we really want this to be a comprehensive office supplies contract, the green one, as a standalone. So we really sort of wrapped our brains to figure out what else is out there that would have an environmental benefit, doesn't have a third-party certification, but could land itself on this green list and green contract. And so what we have is we looked through and we made a list. So if something is battery-free, like a computer mouse that would use a USB, that would eliminate the use of batteries, that would have a positive environmental benefit, so that would be okay. Didn't have to have recycled content, didn't have to meet any of the other criteria. If something is electricity-free, meaning that it replaced something that typically uses electricity, like a mechanical pencil sharpener, we thought that's good, we'll do that. If it's latex-free, like nitrile gloves, if it's non-chemical, very high spend on things like those air dusters, and so we put mechanical keyboard cleaners on there as one type of product that would be acceptable to try to get rid of those. Because those, people just think it's air in a can, but it actually has strong greenhouse gases and ozone depleting chemicals in them. They're fluorinated compounds, and so we try to get rid of those. So those are not allowed at all. But the alternatives are. So if something's processed chlorine-free, like paper products, rechargeable batteries and flashlights, refillable pens and mechanical pencils. Now this just means a pen could have no recycled content, but it's refillable, and that was a big debate, and we decided, you know what, the refillable thing really is important, so let's promote that. Reusable products like microfiber cloths, anything that meets EPA's restriction of hazardous substances, so things like lead-free flash drives are out there, and so that was one thing that we were promoting. There's usually not third-party verification, but it does have an eco-label. Anything that's solar-powered, calculators, flashlights, and another low VOC but no certification is the South Coast Air Quality Management District compliant. You'll see that really awkward acronym on there, and it's just literally a study of Los Angeles' strong air quality management. So you might see that on like a paint or an adhesive. So for this category, you'd see it on an adhesive. So these are other things that could land a product onto the green product list. Next slide. So there are a couple, as I mentioned earlier, there were a couple categories for which we did very specific specifications. One was toner and ink cartridges. So we said if it's a remanufactured cartridge, it makes it. If it's a high yield cartridge, like this one that says XL on it, literally usually has 2 to 3 times more ink or toner in it for the same cartridge, so we thought that was a benefit, even if it doesn't have recycled content, and that was a discussion. Or if it's USDA bio-based. There are some products out there, not very many, but we wanted to include them in there. And what came up is that HP actually has now some recycled content, mostly ink cartridges, where they've been taking the old cartridges and, you know, you take them back, they're incorporating the recycled plastic into it. And so they meet that criteria of over 50% total recycled content. And so we decided, even though we had a specific specification and that was not originally intended because it met that other criteria, we sent out a notice to the vendors that it was fine to include those products that had the high total recycled content. Next slide. And these are just some lists. There's a list that HP has of the different cartridges and their percentage of recycled content. So we used their documentation to figure out which products are on and off that list. Next slide. So there definitely was discussion about that recycled content, but we ended up deciding to just go with it. Okay, so the next slide is the prohibited chemicals and materials in products and packaging. So if something had any of these materials in them, PVC, vinyl, and binders, calendars, and share mats, and PVC is probably the most prevalent product and the most discussion happened. What was interesting to me, and we've been working with Yalmaz Siddiqui at Office Depot, is he said, wow, and they actually have done a good job. They actually have a little thing in their, through Office Max and Office Depot that will say PVC free. So it's, okay, great. So when we did our verification of the bids, we looked to make sure that it said PVC free. But he had said, wow, we only really screened binders. We never looked at the calendars. We never looked at the chair mats or other products to make sure that they didn't have PVC. So this process has then caused them to go back and screen all their products that might have PVC and try to label them better. Polystyrene and clipboards and office organizers. There's a lot of products that have recycled polystyrene, and we are not allowing those on the green list. So again, they're still unconventional. Bisphenol A or BPA is sometimes in thermal paper and plastics, plastic bottles. So if there was a reusable water bottle, for example, it had to say BPA free. Now, there's some discussions about what the replacements are, but that's as far as we could get it. Nothing could say it had nanotechnology. We weren't testing anything, but if it said this uses nanotechnology, we said sorry. Just because there's a lot of concern about the nanotechnology being able to be absorbed by your body, and a lot of questions about that. Some products are listed that say we have antimicrobial ingredients in binders and file folders and things like that, and obviously hand soaps. None of those were allowed on the green list. Again, they can be on the conventional list. Any chemicals that can cause cancer or asthma, there's 2 lists. Actually, there's several lists for cancer and there's an asthma list. So the products can't have anything listed on their MSDS with those products or those chemicals, and nothing could be offered on the green list in an aerosol container. So these, by the way, these are things where if you have an existing contract and you just decide, you know what, I'm going to just adopt these same standards for my contract, and we're going to just start selectively blocking all the PVC or any of the things with, antimicrobial, meaning pesticides in the binders and things like that, you could do that as well. So you could take an existing contract and just start to say, you know what, for our health and environmental reasons, we're just going to block the same way some people block virgin copy paper. Next slide. I'm going to just go a little bit faster just because I want to make sure we get through, and as I said, I do have a hard stop. So, but if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Next slide. So a lot of these chemical restrictions were driven by the state of Oregon's executive order at the state level that's supporting environmentally preferable purchasing and green chemistry. Next slide. So taking all this information that we had for the specifications, the next step was to create a bid sheet that reflected these specifications. So again, we had the data on the high spend items and what was in each category. And so we then went through and each category, and we said, okay, category 1, adhesives, okay, what do we have that meets the specs? What's the highest product by spend or by volume, and then we put those into the bid sheets and populated by that. If they were not in a certain category, they weren't buying the green things a lot, we then took their high spend item and we then said, well, what would be the replacement for this? So say they were buying their highest spend item was a regular dry erase marker, and we said, okay, we can replace it with the exact equivalent product that's a low odor ACMI compliant product, and then we would just put the same, and we agreed to put the same spend in it so we wouldn't handicap. Another thing that is important is that in addition to getting pricing on individual items, if they had to give the same discounts to green and non-green products than conventional, on the conventional list and the non, so they couldn't have lower discounts on this green contract than they had on the regular contract. So then we went through and estimated annual usage for each item and put it into a bid sheet. Next.
So Alicia, did you say that you looked, if somebody was buying, you know, $100,000 worth of conventional dry erase markers, for example, and you wanted them to buy the low VOC dry erase markers?
Yeah.
And so you would, in the contract you negotiated, you would say, we will still spend this much money on dry erase markers, but we want them to be the green dry erase markers. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it was actually numbers. So they might say estimated total numbers instead of amounts. But yeah, we would say they bought 10,000 dry erase markers, then we would say 10,000 dry erase markers and they have to meet this spec. So we didn't want to say, oh, well, only 10% of them were low odor, and therefore we're going to only put the 10%, because we know that they sharpen their pencils based on the volume, and the potential is that that people could buy all of them as these, and we didn't want to handicap that process. And so whatever the total amount for that type of product, whether it was green or non-green, that's the number that got in. So we often would add the two together. We'd say, okay, they bought 10,000, you know, regular ones and 1,000. Then we put 11,000, and we would say, here's the spec, and we try to get that same number.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is a sample of what the bid sheet would look like. This is actually for what was called the RISI paper. These are the high volume papers. And so we would have, you can see in column A, EPP, copy paper 8.5 by 11, and with 30% post-consumer, okay, we want a price on a ream and we want a price on a carton. If you go down, you'll see. And then we also, so that was the minimum. It had to be 30% to meet EPA. But then we said, well, give us a price also on the 100% recycled content. So even if, again, this wasn't a high one for them, we put on the green list, we put 100% recycled on there as well, just to get the good pricing for that. And this was based on someone on what they were buying in the past on this. But for the 20%, we added the volume of all of their paper. So if they had, you know, virgin paper, we added virgin and recycled together. There's a little bit, you know, we were also, because we were trying to complement this other contract and get the same pricing, there was some places where we had to fudge a little bit with that, because they might have had both items on those as on the conventional products. But anyway, so we would say this is how much, you know, paper it was, estimated annual cases, total numbers of reams, and then if the bid sheet would go over and they would have to tell you what brand they were using, whether it had recycled content, and the pricing. Do you have a question?
Well, did you say that you added the virgin paper to the 30%?
Yes.
Okay.
Because again, yeah, you wanted to get the total amount of paper that could potentially be purchased with that. But then with the 100%, we didn't do that. We added it to the 30 instead of the 100. So then the next is, this is just, again, the bid sheet you can see for recycled content pens, and you can see this is the second part of the bid sheet where they would fill in the catalog and the price number and the product offered and the list price and the percentage discount. There's a lot that's being done now to make sure that, you know, if they switch products, that you still get the same discounts. And that they're giving the right discounts when they ultimately put it in the system. We've had a lot of back and forth on, hey, wait a second, you offered 40%. How come now when I'm looking in the thing, I'm only getting 30%? So really trying to make sure that the discounts are applied. I mean, again, this is in the bid sheet, but that's how it kind of played out, so we have that. The next slide, verification on the certifier list. So when the bids came in, we wanted to make sure we could verify that the product did meet the environmental criteria. And the first thing we would do is, if the certifier has a list, we thought that was the most reliable. The least reliable is actually the vendor, because we found that some of the vendors say their stuff has certain certification, but there was a lot of confusion about whether, for example, the product you know, has total recycled content or post-consumer. And so we started, our hierarchy was verification on the certifier list. So we'd look up the product on the certifier list. This is the ACMI list. Next slide shows the second line is going to the manufacturer's information. So is the certification actually physically on the product? Is it on the manufacturer's marketing information or the manufacturer's website? And then the third would be the vendors, because honestly, we would look up the same product and it would have different information between Staples and Office Depot. And we're like, one says it does, one says it doesn't, and so the vendor information was less reliable. Next slide is verification of ongoing compliance with environmental specifications. So anytime, these are starting to get into the contract requirements. So once we verified that the product met the specifications, then it, you know, was fine. Now, if they didn't meet, say they bid something that didn't meet the specification, they weren't completely thrown out. And that was a big discussion in the bid evaluation procedure. Oh gosh, there's 150 market basket items. One of the products, they thought it had a certification, it didn't, or it had too low, or it had SFI instead of FSC. What we did is there was a point system, so they just wouldn't get points for that product. And so depending on the product, if it was a really high volume product, it could really hurt them. And in fact, one of the vendors messed up on the 100% recycled paper, and so they lost a lot of points. Verification of ongoing compliance. So any time in the master agreement, if you know, we come back, as I monitor this contract, or any of the states come back and say, we want to make sure that that product still is on the Green Seal list or still is Energy Star compliant, they have to be able to provide proof. Otherwise, the product could get kicked off. Next slide, number 20, proper labeling of the sustainability attributes. Whether it's on the green list or the non-green list, we really wanted to make sure that there was proper labeling, like to address this problem that we saw, that the vendor information was not always reliable. And so just having this little green leaf on it doesn't really mean anything. We wanted to make sure that it actually had the Green Seal list, or you could look on the catalog and it would say Energy Star. And we're still working with them to make sure that all those products are tagged properly and are labeled. It's going to be an ongoing process, honestly, but that is the intent of the contract, is to make sure that in the ordering system, you go to that thing and you go, okay, I want to buy, you know, a product, and you can know what certification it has or how much recycled content it really has. Next slide, 21. In addition to the mandatory requirements, which those specifications were, actually for both contracts, there were some additional score desirable features, but they had, this is an RFP, so there were points. So points for things like implementation and communication, giving good customer service and training, They also gave points for geographic coverage because this is a national contract, so they want to make sure that the companies could actually supply this. There were some questions that we wrote up about sustainability quest, which basically means, how sustainable is the company? Are their buildings LEED certified? Do they use alternative energy, things like that? Environmental services, so what do they offer in terms of a service? There were some mandatory requirements on service, so you have to, even if they're not on the green list, they have to do a green spend report. There were points for disadvantaged businesses, for their packaging, and for good return policies. So on recycling services, they all, whether it's a green contract or not, or the conventional contract, they had to offer toner cartridge recycling. But they got extra points if they also had a system set up to offer battery recycling or compact fluorescent recycling or any other, some of them had binder recycling. So they would get extra points for the different types of materials that they recycled. But the toner cartridge, free toner cartridge recycling was mandatory. The next slide, and I'm sorry, I'm just jamming through these, track 2 green awards. So the green awards, so WSCA NASPO, now called Value Point, awarded 2 contracts on the green track to Office Depot and to Staples. So for you all that are using Office Depot, what this means is that this contract is the green, the track 2 contract is just basically blocking everything that doesn't meet those specifications. And I'm interested in working with people to find out, can you get everything you want or almost everything that you want on this contract? What else? Because we do want this to be a full service contract. So if you do end up looking at it, would be interested in your feedback. We really tried to make sure there were products in every category and every high spend item. Next slide, number 23, green spend report. Both Staples and Office Depot do a good job at doing green spend reports. They can give you data. You have to ask for it to get at the SKU level, and you can get it down to which department and who ordered what to see how people are doing, and you can get this aggregated spend data to say, okay, 30% of the paper that you bought was green, met a certain criteria, and then they say where the cutoff is. And this with Staples, they do have a basic, so it has, we'll get some credit if it was recycled less than 30%, and advance of 30% or more. In the green contract, it would just be what met the criteria, because everything already there is going to be pre-screened. Office Depot also has a spend report. Yeah.
We do get the green spend report from Office Depot, but that's their criteria, not the criteria that you've been promoting here.
Correct.
So they have made a decision about what is green and what's not green.
Correct, and some of them are starting to call it the WSCA green, or the Oregon green, and so they're having to fiddle with that to make sure their definitions of green and our definitions. Like I said, they will have stuff that is not as green as we have. They'll have PVC recycled binders. They'll have stuff with SFI or 10%. And so what we're trying to do through this contract is to get everyone to define, okay, this is what's really green. Now, Office Depot does this thing. You can see it's like the dark green and the light green. And that's been their strategy. So we have not yet worked out, because it's such a new contract, what is the, dark green and light green, and how is the spend reporting going to be different for this contract. There's still a lot of things that are just need to get, worked out with them. So I'm just showing you what they have now. So we're working with them to try to get consistent green spend reports. If anyone's interested in these contracts, the best person to talk to is Pam Johnson from the state of Oregon, and she's happy to talk to anyone. Because this is a WSCA contract, You can also talk to Tim Hay. My understanding is that it's important to use WSCA. You have to get your state to approve it, but it sounds like you guys are mostly going out to bid on your own. So you may just want to kind of, if you're interested, take some of our specifications, bid sheets, and all that. I can provide all of that as public information right now. Also, the pricing that they provided is public information. So if you wanted to compare the pricing, there was an interesting, and Jean, maybe I should talk with you offline about this, but there was an interesting hospital that is thinking to cut costs of getting rid of all the recycled products, and we were able to find a lot of the recycled products that they were buying, the high volume ones like recycled content copy paper, at the same price that they would be getting their virgin paper. So I think we're going to be able to stave off that decision. But if anyone wants to compare your pricing with this, now you have, some of you have different vendors, but you could apply the same criteria.
Are the prices public too then that are on this contract?
Yes, they are. And I have a login to get the information. I certainly have I have all the market baskets. You can look at that and I can provide you with that. So that would be the top 150 high spend items. So let me just ask, is there any other questions and comments? And Jean, I'm going to need to turn this over to you because I'm going to have to go on to my other call. But I wanted to really focus on this question 3 because I asked these other questions already. The first one, are you purchasing from any of the 2 vendors that are on there? Do you use a cooperative or piggyback, or do you use your own, do your own contract? It sounds like that's what you're doing. But the third question, what would make it easier for your contract users to identify and buy environmentally preferable office supplies? And what would you like help with? And maybe if you guys could have that conversation, and maybe Jean, why don't you and I then check back in with each other to try to figure out what do you think could be next steps? What would be most useful? I'm happy to share all of the contracting documents from this with you, and you can share it with folks to figure out, what could you do at your facility that would make, make it easier for you to either specify if you're going out to bid or help your purchasers to do better at your facilities. And is there any other questions before I get offline? Hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jean, okay? Hello? Okay. It looks like I have cut out.
I can still hear you. This is Scott.
Huh, okay. Well, I can hear you, Scott, but I don't know what happened to Jean. So if you could just let her know, the connection's been, she may have lost the connection on her side.
Okay.
But if you could just let her know, I'm available to answer any individual questions. My contact information is on there. If you guys could have a conversation for the next bit of this meeting and try to figure out, is there a strategy that you guys can work on either together or individually? I'm happy to provide whatever support you need.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm going to go jump on my other call, but I'm sorry this kind of breezed through. We can have a follow-up discussion if you guys want to have that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Bye-bye.
Jean, can you hear us now?
I don't know what happened to Jean.
Yeah, I don't know.
We can't hear you, Jean. She's typing in here.
Scott says he can't hear me.
Is that Eugene?
Yes.
I can
There we
hear you.
go.
Okay. Well, I wonder what happened. How long ago did you lose me?
Right
Quite a while, probably a good 5 minutes at least.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's
I'm
all
glad
right.
you're back. We were just, I don't know if you heard Alicia sign off.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
talked to it.
Okay, and so I just wanted to ask this question, and John said that one of the things he would like would be helpful would be to have the standards that they developed for this process, so that he could take those to the vendor that they use, which is Payless. And so Ed, you guys use Payless as well.
Yes.
Do you have your own standards, or are you interested in Alicia's standards?
Well, I'd be interested in presenting it to Payless, and maybe John and I could work together with that, and then see what their response is.
Yeah.
That might be a good idea if multiple people ask, and you may get more of a better response.
I think so too. And Scott, I don't know, are you aware, as far as the University of Nebraska goes, I don't think the university has ever asked for specific green items on the list, have they?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. Do you think that the university would be interested at all to see a bid based on these specifications?
Personally, I would be very interested. I can't speak for the people above my pay grade, of course, but I think throwing the information out there, I think, is a good start.
I'd sure like to see that price list you got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting.
What I said to John here, I don't know if you heard me, was that I could take your high spend items, because I think I have those from when we first started, to do this work. And I could just ask Alicia for the prices for those items. But we can go deeper than that if you want. So you'd like to do that. Do you want to make a list, or how do you want to do it?
That'd be good, because our biggest spend is paper. So.
Okay. Well, I can sure ask her for some things on paper. What else are you interested in?
Well, toner cartridges.
Our toner comes as part of our contract, so that we wouldn't have any control over that.
You mean because you have all leased copy machines and printers? Okay. Of course,
we do as well, but there are a lot of individuals who have desktop printers, and
that's true.
They buy toners for those.
We do have a little bit of that.
We have way too much of it here.
It's like the most expensive way to go.
I know. But, they don't have to get out of their chair.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, well, maybe I could email each of you separately with the list that I would have. Scott, I would just email you probably the list that between you and O, and just see if that's similar to what you would be interested in. And then you could add items to that, and then we could send that all to Alicia and ask her to let us know what the pricing is from this other contract.
Perfect.
And anything else? What other kind of information or assistance would be useful?
Is there a description of each of those different rating systems, like SFI or the FSC? I'd like more information if there's a list somewhere of all of those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we can do that. I think that she would send me, I'm not sure that this is all of it.
That's what I wondered.
Right. This is what you're talking about, Scott?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there others they accept or not accept?
Yeah. Okay, I'll ask about that. And then are you familiar with the EPA CPG list?
I am not.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a good one.
It's their recycled content guidelines.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, so I'll get you some more information on that. Anything else?
For our Office Depot, most of our orders go through eShop, which is just an online
Right.
procurement software.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I wonder if it would be possible to notate with like a visible symbol or something by each product that is within the standards we specify. Since we probably won't get to the point of banning items right away, maybe we could make it very visible right on that website what the products that are green are.
I think right now Office Depot will put it's their definition of green.
Yeah, and I know they've got the light green to the dark green, but if we specified stuff that we would approve as maybe a sustainability committee or something like that, I wonder if that would be a possibility.
That's a good question. I think they'd be able to do that because I'm sure that that's just part of their database that drives that thing. But that's a really good question. I'll follow up on that.
Okay. And I could ask our purchasing people here as well.
Sure.
You guys use SideQuest, don't you?
Yes.
Use what?
SideQuest.
BuyQuest?
SideQuest is
I
their
don't know.
purchasing software.
They developed the
Oh, okay.
eShop. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have another question?
I had another question. It was about, I think for Alicia for clarification. She talked about the point system when they evaluate the bids, when the bids come in and they assign points to the items. I wasn't quite sure how those points were assigned and if different items get different points, or they have different weights, or how they determine to give points to the items coming in. Because she mentioned that there's a list of 150 things and some get points and some may not get points, but does every item get 1 point, or how does it go? I wasn't quite sure how they did that.
Yeah, I don't know either. And she said that one of the vendors messed up on their recycled paper. Say again?
It was a high volume item too.
Yes. And so that hurt them quite a bit. And I think that was, when she was talking about that, I think it was where she was talking about verification. And she said that I think it was right in here where they scored desirable features of the contract. So I'll follow up with her on that scoring.
I was just curious to see.
Sure. I imagine it had something to do with the volume, as well. But so if your product wasn't as desirable and we wanted to buy a lot of it, that would hurt you. Yeah. Any other questions for follow-up?
That's all from me, Gene. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Something I asked offline earlier.
Yeah.
The list of prohibited chemicals and materials.
Right.
I'm kind of curious where we can find a good list of what chemicals are. We all have an idea, but is there a comprehensive list with all prohibited chemicals and materials?
I don't think there is, but I think people use a couple of different lists. But that's another question I'll follow up with Alicia to see what they did. Yeah. And then and if she gives an answer, I can also chime in on that. People talk about things when it comes to prohibited chemicals. The persistent bioaccumulative toxins list that EPA has, people typically don't want those. And there's some list chemicals of concern.
Right. That's what I'm wondering. Where's that gray area?
Right.
What people are using in that.
Right. Okay. So. All right. Well, thank you all for being on the call, and I may just, I will send a follow-up email and maybe just ask a couple questions about how you liked it and so forth. And please let me know other things that we can do. We're getting toward the end of our project on environmentally preferable purchasing, and we'll be doing another survey like in June. So coming up before too much longer. I think we have 1 or 2 more messages to go out, and then we'll do another set of surveys, and then we'll be doing reporting and wrap up, and I'll be trying to meet with everybody before the end to make sure that we've got everything you need.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.